Imagine this. You are a king. You have limitless wealth, armies, scholars, physicians, and thousands of servants. Everything you could possibly wish for is within your power. But in the face of disease, you are just as insignificant as the poorest beggar outside your castle walls. You are Sigismund of Luxembourg, ruler of an empire, yet your castle is steeped in the stench of fear, decay, and deadly ignorance. Here, in the very heart of the Middle Ages, your journey from cradle to grave is a chain of daily humiliations, filth, untreated sores, and inevitable losses. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you are watching from and what time it is for you. I'm really curious to see who's joined us. Now, settle in. We're about to begin. You were born in the year 1368, which sounds impressive if you like numbers, but frankly, your birth year is more like a curse than a blessing. You arrive in the world with the full weight of the Luxembourg name and a host of expectations already crawling at your cradle like so many fleas in the straw. Do not be fooled. This is not a golden age. You are not stepping into a world of progress and comfort. The world you enter is one of endless drafts, bad smells, and an almost obsessive relationship with death. Imagine this. Your very first breaths are taken in a drafty stone chamber filled with tapestries that smell of dust and centuries old smoke. Your mother, pale and weary, is surrounded by anxious women, priests, and assorted hangers on, each one convinced that if they say enough prayers or burn enough incense, the Lord will personally spare you from the fate of so many royal infants. You, meanwhile, are largely indifferent to your lineage and the anxieties of your elders, because you are, let's not forget, barely a day old. And what you mostly want is not to die before your first week is out. Medieval Europe, in all its gray and splintery grandeur, is a place where survival is not so much a given as a daily miracle. Death is not a distant philosophical concept, but a practical reality lurking in every cough, every chill, every passing stranger with suspiciously red cheeks. Your childhood is not protected by modern medicine because the idea of medicine, as you might one day wish it existed, is still several centuries away from making any real sense. Instead, there are herbal concoctions, prayers, and, for the truly desperate, bloodletting. From the start, your caretakers are locked in a grim contest with fate. Your nursemaids hover like anxious crows, forever checking your color, your temperature, the vigor of your wailing. They discuss your bowel movements with the seriousness of generals at war. If you do not fuss, they worry you are too quiet. If you fuss too much, they worry you are possessed. It is a miracle anyone survives to see adulthood, and a greater miracle that anyone in the room can still muster hope. And what of the castle itself? The mighty stone walls meant to protect you from armies also keep in the cold and damp. There are no windows, as you would imagine them, only narrow slits that let in just enough light to reveal how dark and uninviting everything truly is. The fires that burn to keep you warm also fill the rooms with smoke, and the straw on the floor is changed only when the stench becomes undeniable. The world is small, suffocating, and very, very fragile. Outside your nursery, the reality is even grimmer. Children do not often grow old here. Your siblings, if you have any, are just as likely to perish before they speak their first word as they are to survive. Mothers weep over tiny coffins, and fathers consult astrologers and priests, desperate for signs that the next child will do better. The death toll is not just a statistic, it is the background music of everyday life. You grow up acutely aware of mortality. You are told stories of saints and martyrs, most of whom met appalling ends. You are reminded, gently or not so gently, that all things are fleeting. Toys, if you have them, are simple and splintery. Laughter is rare and always tinged with anxiety. Each meal is a test of your body's ability to tolerate what passes for food in these times. Meat that is more sinew than substance, vegetables grown in questionable soil, bread that can crack a tooth, and yet somehow you survive those first precarious years. Your nannies credit the Virgin Mary, the local saint, or their own herbal wisdom, depending on whom you ask. Your parents are relieved, but not yet ready to believe you will live long enough to cause them any real trouble. You are one of the lucky ones, and you grow just enough to start taking in your surroundings with a sense of both wonder and dread. But as you take your first stumbling steps through the cold halls, as you learn to avoid the darkest corners and to greet every adult with the required mixture of terror and respect, you begin to understand. Life here is not so much lived as endured. Each day is a negotiation with fate, each cough a threat, each shiver a warning. Your earliest memories will be tinged with the scent of smoke, the chill of stone, and the ever present shadow of disease. Welcome to the late 14th century. Welcome to your life, Sigismund of Luxembourg. It will only get darker from here. You are, by all the definitions of your age, privileged. You are the scion of the Luxembourg dynasty, which means the world expects you to be swaddled in silks, fed on delicacies, and cared for by people whose only occupation is keeping you alive and more or less functional. To the peasants living outside your stone walls, your existence must seem like a life of unimaginable luxury. But you know better, because you are living it, and you are learning from the very start that privilege is not a suit of armor. At best, it is a somewhat moth-eaten cloak with holes in all the wrong places. Your chamber is filled with things that would make any ordinary child gasp in wonder, at least for a moment. Rough woven tapestries that depict battles and miracles, golden cups too heavy for your tiny hands, a cradle carved with images of dragons and lions. You have a nursemaid, a tutor, sometimes even a fool to amuse you, and always a place to murmur over your soul. In the cold mornings, your attendants pile furs over your body until you cannot move your arms. At night, they scatter bundles of sweet herbs on your pillow to drive away evil spirits and, just possibly, the smell of unwashed bodies. Yet for all this, You are not safe. Not really. No one in Europe is safe. Your food is richer than the peasant's gruel, but it is still suspect. Pigeon pies filled with stringy meat, overcooked fish caught in muddy rivers, bread made from grains that may or may not have rotted on the journey to the kitchen. There are feasts, certainly, and more courses than you can count on your sticky fingers, but the sight of a roasted swan does not prevent you from being doubled over in pain by midnight. You learn quickly that food is a gamble. You have watched lords and ladies leave the table with cheerful faces, only to be carried from their beds before dawn, writhing in agony, dying from what is politely called a surfeit. Your own stomach rebels regularly, leaving you curled up and miserable, while your nursemaids debate whether to apply a warm poultice or let you sweat it out in silence. The water is no better. You are told never to drink it plain. Boil it, flavor it, add wine or beer, your tutors instruct, but never trust the well. You hear stories of entire villages felled by what they drank, of wells that run red in the spring and black in the autumn, and you wonder sometimes whether anything is truly safe to swallow. Milk is for children and the dying, wine is for everyone else, and both are suspect in their own unique ways. But the greatest threat is not in what you eat or drink, it is in the very air you breathe. The castle is forever draughty, the walls thick but porous. The wind slips through cracks and under doors, bringing with it the smells of latrines, stables, and unwashed bodies. Bad air is blamed for everything, from coughs to madness. Physicians hang bunches of rue and rosemary from your bedposts, convinced that a little greenery will keep out the invisible demons of disease. Sometimes they burn strange smelling resins that make your eyes water and your chest ache, but you still wake up coughing, shivering under your furs. And, of course, there are the physicians themselves. If privilege buys you anything in this life, it is their constant attention, which is not always a blessing. They are, in your experience, a procession of grave, bearded men who poke and prod and prescribe with equal measures of confidence and confusion. They speak of humors and balances, of stars and seasons, and they rarely agree with each other. If you are feverish, one will bleed you, another will insist on a purge, a third will mix up an herbal concoction so bitter you are convinced it must be poison. They wrap you in wet sheets, then dry ones, then tell you to sweat out the evil. Occasionally, someone suggests prayer. This, at least, does no harm. Your parents, for their part, are desperate to keep you alive, if only because your survival is tied to their legacy. Your mother paces and weeps. Your father arranges for masses to be said in distant cathedrals. You overhear servants whispering about the fate of other royal children who died despite having all the best care, all the prayers, all the expensive amulets pinned to their shirts. Some superstitious nursemaid mutters that it is all in God's hands anyway, and you wonder if God has ever been inside a castle in the middle of winter. You are kept apart from the worst of the filth, or so you are told, but every corner of the world is soaked in disease. Rats live in the walls. Fleas nest in the rushes underfoot. You see dogs and cats wandering the halls, and every so often a sickly looking pigeon will appear in the rafters, looking for a place to die. There are lice in your hair, even after the most determined combings. When your tutors teach you about the world, they never mention that you are sharing it with an invisible army of pests. Even your sleep offers no safety. You wake in the night, sweating and feverish, convinced that death is somewhere in the room. Perhaps it is only the shadow of a tapestry or a draught cold enough to bite through your bones, but you learn to be wary, to distrust your own senses. The adults assure you it is nothing. You are not convinced. It is a strange sort of privilege, this life of yours. You are sheltered, yes, but only from some of the world's dangers. Disease does not care for gold or birthright. It moves through the halls as easily as the kitchen smoke. Your greatest comfort, perhaps, is that you are not alone. Every noble child you know faces the same risks, fights the same invisible enemies, listens to the same contradictory advice. Your fate is tied not only to your name, but to the stubborn, indifferent reality of medieval life. So you pull the covers over your head, breathe in the sharp scent of dried lavender, and hope, as so many before you have hoped, that tomorrow will come without fever, cough, or pain. You are privileged, yes, but you are not, and never will be, safe. You are not even old enough to ride a horse or pronounce your full list of titles when your body betrays you for the first time. The memory of it will linger, floating at the edge of your mind long after you have forgotten the taste of your mother's milk or the texture of the cradle's wood. You wake one morning feeling strange, a heat in your skin, a weight behind your eyes. You are neither truly awake nor properly asleep, drifting between chills and sweats, and for the first time, you feel your own smallness in a world much too large. Your nursemaid notices immediately. You do not wail as you usually do, nor do you squirm away from the daily ritual of being bundled in far too many layers. You simply lie there, limp and sticky, blinking up at the cobwebbed ceiling as if it might offer an explanation. The nursemaids murmur to one another, voices low and urgent. You catch only fragments. He is too quiet, too pale, God's will, perhaps, and most ominously, call the physician. The physician arrives smelling of stale wine and something herbal. He looks at you as one might inspect a roast for spoilage. He lays a heavy hand on your forehead, frowns, and then begins a litany of medieval medicine's greatest hits. There is the compulsory prayer, whispered just loudly enough that you are certain God can hear, followed by the careful mixing of a drink so foul that you gag before it touches your tongue. The taste is not the worst part. The worst part is knowing that no one, absolutely no one, knows what is wrong with you, and so they must try everything. And so begins the parade of remedies. A poultice of onions and herbs is placed on your chest, which accomplishes nothing but staining the bedclothes. Your wrists are wrapped in wool soaked with vinegar, because someone once read that this draws out the bad humors. You are given sips of warm beer, a curious sort of comfort in a child's mouth. When you do not improve, the physician produces a leech. Yes, an actual leech, black and shiny, and insists on letting it attach to your arm. You stare at the creature, half fascinated and half terrified, and wonder if it will suck the life from you more efficiently than the fever ever could. The castle becomes a theater of panic. Servants tiptoe through the corridors, whispering that you may not survive the week. Your mother clings to her rosary. Your father grows silent and grim. It is not love that you see in their faces, not exactly, but the weight of dynastic expectation. The knowledge that your continued existence is not just a family matter, but a political one. Heirs are currency, and your value is measured not only in affection, but in the ability to remain alive. The room itself changes, as if rearranged by unseen hands. The windows are sealed shut with strips of cloth, lest some evil breeze slip inside. Candles are lit in every corner, flickering over shadowy walls and sending strange reflections skittering across your vision. Bowls of burning herbs fill the air with a choking haze. At night, the priest visits to sprinkle holy water and mutter Latin phrases while you hover somewhere between dreams and delirium. Fever is not a private matter here. It is a communal spectacle. Every member of the household is enlisted in the battle against your illness. Some pray, some wring their hands, some simply watch in morbid fascination, as if your suffering contains some secret knowledge about their own fate. You overhear talk of other children, cousins, siblings, heirs to distant thrones, who succumbed to illness despite wealth, despite faith, despite every desperate measure. You realize, in your first honest moment of self awareness, that your life is fragile, not promised, and most certainly not protected by your parents' privilege. Days blur together in a fog of heat and exhaustion. Sometimes you see things that cannot be real: a white bird in the rafters, the face of a long dead ancestor grinning from the tapestries, the gentle hand of your mother stroking your forehead, though she is not in the room. You sweat through the sheets, tremble with chills, drift in and out of consciousness. The physician returns again and again, always with a new theory and a new vial of something dreadful. At some point, you lose track of time entirely, and then, one morning, the fever breaks. You wake drenched in sweat, aching and hungry, but suddenly alive in a way that feels almost miraculous. The adults declare it a victory for their potions and prayers, but you sense, even at your young age, that it was chance more than science. The leech is gone, the vinegar wool tossed away, and you are left staring at the ceiling, changed in ways no one can see. You are praised for your strength, as if you had any choice in the matter. Your father orders a feast, though you are not allowed to taste half the dishes. Your nursemaid weeps with relief, but you are the one who remembers the sensation, the helplessness, the way the world tilted, the cold realization that nothing, absolutely nothing, guarantees your survival. From this day, you see illness everywhere: in the faint cough of a servant, in the pallor of a visiting lord, in the red rim of your own eyes reflected in a silver dish. You know, as only the recently recovered know, that every day is an undeserved gift and every night could be your last. You are not yet wise, but you are no longer innocent. And this, more than any lesson from a tutor or sermon from a priest, is the true education of a medieval heir, an introduction to the only reality that matters, in which life is a negotiation with death, and that every fever is a reminder that the negotiation is never entirely in your hands. You are a little older now, old enough to recognize faces, to distinguish between the scent of clean straw and the reek of burning herbs, to recoil at the memory of leeches and prayers muttered over your shivering body. If you have learned one thing in this world, it is that nobody, not your father, not your mother, not even the wise and bearded men who parade through your chamber, truly knows what they are doing when it comes to your health. In your world, medicine is a peculiar performance, a marriage of solemn ritual and haphazard guesswork, and you are always the central prop. Physicians arrive in groups. They dress in strange costumes, flowing robes and colors that do not exist in nature, pointed hats, sometimes even mysterious masks that make them look less like healers and more like harbingers of doom. Each physician brings a case filled with mysterious vials, bags of herbs, stones with supposed magical properties, and sometimes relics of saints wrapped in faded silk. You have seen them bow to one another and argue furiously in languages you do not understand. Occasionally, they agree on a treatment, which is always less reassuring than it sounds. These men, and they are always men, study your tongue and eyes, your urine and your pulse. They declare your humors imbalanced, your spleen enlarged, your bile dangerously high or low. They diagnose you based on the stars, the weather, the phase of the moon, or, when truly stumped, the way the birds sound at dawn. Some swear by Aristotle and Galen, some by Avicenna, some by the local wise woman who lives near the city wall. They rarely agree on anything except that you should obey their instructions and that their bill should be paid in full. The treatments are an ordeal in themselves. You become intimately familiar with the taste of wormwood, the sting of mustard plasters, the deep ache left by bloodletting. You are bled for fevers, purged for chills, fed bitter potions for everything in between. Sometimes you are wrapped in hot, wet blankets and left to sweat until you hallucinate angels and demons dancing at the foot of your bed. If you complain of pain in your head, you are given a compress of cabbage leaves. If your stomach aches, you swallow a concoction so foul you suspect it is meant to punish you rather than heal you. When the physicians grow tired, or when your mother's patience wears thin, a different sort of healer is summoned. She comes quietly, without a retinue or expensive gifts, and you notice immediately that she is not like the others. She carries her knowledge in her hands and her eyes, not in books or scrolls. She examines you without ceremony, listens to your breathing, touches your forehead, and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like a prayer, though she never says it in Latin. This woman, a midwife, a herbalist, a wise one, brings you teas brewed from plants you have seen growing in the castle's neglected corners. Her hands are steady, her voice is low. She does not promise to cure you. She offers comfort and patience, sitting by your bedside long after the physicians have returned to their lectures and disputes. The other adults do not trust her, not really, but they are willing to try anything when your fever does not break. You learn that healing in this era is mostly about ritual and hope. If the physicians believe in anything, it is the power of appearances. They prescribe elaborate regimens. Eat this, but only at dusk. Drink that, but only if the sky is clear. Recite these prayers, burn these herbs, avoid those foods, and above all, never disobey their instructions. If you improve, they congratulate themselves and each other. If you do not, the fault is yours or sometimes your mother's. Magic and science are not separate things here. Nobody draws a hard line between faith and evidence, between the wisdom of ancient texts and the muttered charms of a peasant woman. Holy relics and pagan amulets jostle for space on your nightstand. Your mother crosses herself and leaves a loaf of bread on the windowsill, just in case. Your father funds a new altar in the cathedral and then nods approvingly when a healer ties a wolf's tooth around your neck. Sometimes you listen to the physicians argue about humors, about the color of your urine, about the proper alignment of the planets, and you realize that their certainty is mostly performance. Their remedies are, more often than not, wild guesses, seasoned with a few Latin phrases and a great deal of pride. You begin to understand that their power lies in their authority, not their results. They hold life and death in their hands, but only because everyone pretends it is so. You are never allowed to forget your place in all this. You are the patient, the object, the reason for the ritual. You do not speak unless spoken to, and you certainly do not question their methods. When you do, you are told that you must trust the wisdom of your elders and the will of God. When you recover, everyone is quick to give credit to the latest treatment, though you suspect the fever simply ran its course. At night, as you lie awake listening to the distant howls of dogs and the softer sobbing of servants, you try to make sense of it all. Is there a true cure for illness, or is everyone just guessing, clinging to scraps of knowledge handed down through centuries of suffering and superstition? Are the physicians any better than the healers who mutter to the wind and tie herbs above your door? You do not know the answer, and as you will learn, neither does anyone else. In this time, science and magic are woven so tightly that no one can tell where one ends and the other begins. And so you endure, sometimes a little better, sometimes a little worse, always the subject of someone else's hopeful experiment, always the reason for another whispered prayer. You fall asleep to the mingled scents of rosemary, wax, and smoke, knowing that, if nothing else, you will awaken to another day of uncertainty, a day in which your life depends not on reason or order, but on the unpredictable, inexhaustible imagination of those who claim to heal. If you were born centuries later, You might have learned about bacteria, viruses, or even something as wondrous and dull as germs. But in your world, nobody knows a microbe from a miracle. Your greatest enemies are invisible, unpronounceable, and, most damning of all, utterly misunderstood. Every morning, you rise to fight a war that you cannot see, name, or win. Your day begins not with fresh water and soap, but with a quick swipe of a damp cloth across your face. Water, after all, is considered dangerous. Baths are the stuff of great risk and greater scandal. The physician will tell your mother that too much bathing opens the pores and allows death itself to crawl in. You take solace in the rare, tepid spongings, which leave you feeling almost clean until the smell of the castle regains its grip. Your sheets are changed only when the stench becomes unbearable. The straw on the floor is replaced less often than you would hope. It is not just your own body that endures this quiet siege. The castle itself is alive with movement. Rats scuttle behind the walls and between the rushes, leaving their droppings wherever they please. Mice nibble at stores of grain, and sometimes you hear the distinct crunch of something's teeth in the darkness of your bedchamber. Fleas are your constant companions, as familiar as any friend. Their bites are sharp, their presence eternal, and nobody seems very interested in doing more than cursing their existence. You develop a relationship with filth, complex, pragmatic, resigned. There is a hierarchy to dirt. There is the dirt that accumulates under your fingernails, the persistent stain at the edge of your robes, the faint crust behind your ears. There is also the more ambitious dirt, the greasy layer that coats the kitchen walls, the slimy sheen on the handrails, the mysterious mold in the corners of the chapel. You see grown men and women wipe their hands on their clothing after eating, and you do the same, learning that cleanliness is both a privilege and a risk. Meals are a gamble. The bread, sometimes sour and heavy, is better than nothing, but not by much. Cheese can be sharp or suspicious. The meat is only occasionally fresh, often salted beyond reason, or spiced to hide the fact that it has begun to turn. You watch your elders sniff their portions carefully, turning plates to the light before taking a bite. If you are lucky, you avoid the worst of it. If you are unlucky, your stomach will remind you for days. You never forget the way your body revolts after a questionable supper, the chills, the sweats, the burning ache in your belly that cannot be soothed by any amount of holy water or motherly fretting. As for water, you are warned away from it. Bad water brings death, the cooks say, and so you drink ale or watered wine regardless of your age. The castle's well is a source of both life and fear. You are told that entire villages have been lost to poisoned water, that unseen forces can turn a spring deadly overnight. Occasionally, a servant dies suddenly, and whispers ripple through the halls about cursed wells and angry saints. You listen, and you drink what you are given, suspecting that nothing is truly safe. The air itself feels thick with menace. During cold months, windows are kept tightly shut, trapping smoke and smells inside. Candles and torches burn constantly, filling every room with a haze that catches in your throat. The theory is that bad air, miasma, spreads sickness. Priests wave incense, healers hang bundles of dried herbs in doorways, and someone always insists that burning dung will drive the evil spirits out. You choke on the fumes, but nobody questions the wisdom of the ages. Sometimes you glimpse your reflection in a polished goblet or a bit of glass and wonder if you have always looked so tired. You see shadows under your eyes, a sheen of sweat on your forehead, a pallor that never fully fades. You know, in your bones, that you are not entirely well, but neither is anyone else. Sickness is as common as gossip. Your companions cough and sneeze and scratch without embarrassment. You hear the wheezing of old servants, the constant hacking of guards in the courtyard, the resigned snuffling of the priest as he reads your prayers. At night, the castle grows even more dangerous. Rats emerge from their hiding places, making their rounds with the confidence of true landlords. Bats swoop in from the eaves, bedbugs torment you, and you sometimes wake to find angry red bites all along your arms and neck. Your nursemaid advises you to sleep with sprigs of lavender under your pillow, but you suspect the insects find it as comforting as you do. Illness is so present, so ordinary, that it has lost all power to shock. Children die in their cradles, and life goes on. A bout of vomiting is met with little more than a shrug, unless the victim is of noble blood. You are taught to endure pain in silence, to grit your teeth through fevers and chills, to trust that the worst will pass or it will not. Either way, it is not in your hands. There are no handkerchiefs, no soap to speak of, no knowledge of hygiene beyond the most basic do not eat where you defecate, and even that is a lesson some of your elders ignore. The wise women sometimes mention the importance of clean water and fresh air, but nobody listens to women unless they are very, very sick. Despite all of this, you survive. You are not sure if it is luck, stubbornness, or the endless layers of filth that have made you immune to the world's worst threats. You grow accustomed to the company of invisible enemies, and you learn not to fear what you cannot see. The struggle against unseen microbes, though you do not know to call them that, is the backdrop of your everyday. You grow up knowing that life itself is a negotiation with filth, a contest between your body and the world it inhabits. There are days when you win and days when you lose, but there is never a final victory. Disease is always lurking, always waiting, a silent and patient hunter in the corridors of your home. And so you rise each morning, brush the crumbs from your tunic, and step into the fray once more, unclean, unknowing, unafraid, and more alive than anyone in the castle dares to admit. If anyone outside your castle walls could see the splendor of your table, they would think your every meal is a celebration of victory over hunger. To be fair, the spectacle is impressive even to you. The long hall fills with golden light as dozens of torches flicker and gleam on polished cups and platters. You sit high above the crowd, wrapped in velvet, gazing down on a world of roasted birds, spiced stews, enormous pies, wheels of cheese, fruits piled in precarious towers. It is a stage for appetite and abundance. Yet you know, perhaps sooner than most, that every feast is a gamble, a sort of culinary duel with death, in which you are both challenger and victim. The food, for all its appearance of plenty, comes with hazards no amount of pageantry can disguise. At every banquet, you learn to scan the dishes with the same wary eye you reserve for unfamiliar dogs. The cooks are skilled, but their skills are not always enough to outpace rot, worms, or simple bad luck. You remember the rules, passed down in murmurs and warnings. Eat the bread first, in case the stew is too strong. Avoid anything with a suspicious sheen. Always watch what the lord at the head of the table eats. If he survives the first course, perhaps you will too. Never take the last piece of meat from a platter. It has sat out longest, gathering whatever unseen poisons the air has to offer. Meat is a particular minefield. The hunts are glorious, but the venison is sometimes green by the time it is roasted. The fish, caught in distant rivers and brought on shaky carts over muddy roads, is best eaten as soon as possible, or, failing that, with enough spices and vinegar to mask its age. Spices are a sign of wealth, yes, but more than that, they are a desperate bid to win the race against decay. Salt, pepper, cloves, cinnamon. They disguise as much as they flavor. Once, at a feast honoring a visiting noble, you watch as a roasted peacock is paraded through the hall, feathers intact and shimmering, beak tipped with gold. It is a marvel to behold, but you notice how few actually taste the meat. Instead, they pick at the garnish and toast to your father's generosity, all the while eyeing the dish with suspicion. Later that night, you hear that two guests were carried from the hall, doubled over in pain, and you are not surprised. You have your own stories, of course. The time you nibbled a sweetmeat too late in the evening and spent the next day shivering and retching. The chicken that tasted slightly off, despite the cook's insistence that it was fresh from the market. The unidentifiable stew that set your teeth on edge and left a strange numbness in your mouth. At banquets, the line between celebration and catastrophe is thin indeed. Not that it stops anyone. The rhythm of court life is built around feasts, marriages, alliances, births, treaties, even minor victories at the hunt. Each demands a table groaning with food. You learn to pace yourself, to decline the more dangerous dishes with polite excuses. You see the old courtiers do the same, their wisdom earned through decades of close calls. There are, of course, more deliberate dangers lurking in the banquet hall. Poison is a constant threat, whispered about in every corridor. Cups are swapped, dishes tested, tasters employed, and then quietly dismissed when they become inconvenient. You watch as the taster sips your wine, waits, nods, and moves on, but you are not comforted. You know the most insidious poisons are slow, subtle, their symptoms mistaken for illness or bad luck. The physicians are no help at all. Should someone fall ill after a feast, there is much debate. Was it a surfeit, a corrupted stew, the work of an enemy, or simply the will of God? The remedies are the same as always: purges, bleeding, prayers. The result is the same too. Sometimes people recover, sometimes they do not. You wonder, on the darker nights, why anyone bothers to eat at all. But hunger is stronger than fear, and so is tradition. Banquets continue, the tables reset, the food replaced. In this dance of risk and ritual, no one ever really learns the lesson. Each feast is an act of faith in your own resilience, or perhaps an act of denial in the face of mortality. So you continue to sit at the head of the table, nodding to toasts, tearing at bread, and sampling whatever dish seems least likely to betray you. You watch your companions laugh, argue, grow pale, and occasionally disappear, their seats filled by others with less caution or shorter memories. If you are lucky, the meal ends with only mild discomfort, a headache, a heaviness in the belly, a sour taste that fades by morning. If you are unlucky, well, the castle has plenty of priests and even more gravediggers. In the world you inhabit, to eat is to risk, and to survive is simply to have chosen, by chance or cunning, the lesser evil. You finish your wine, push away the final plate, and rise with the others to thank God for the bounty, never mentioning, of course, the invisible dangers you have once again outlasted. Tomorrow there will be another feast, another risk, and you will play your part again, just as everyone else must, until the odds turn against you and your luck finally runs out. It begins, as such things always do, with a rumor. You hear it in the courtyard, between the hollow strikes of a distant church bell and the shuffling footsteps of servants. A merchant has fallen ill in the town below. Someone's nephew has taken to his bed and not risen again. It is nothing at first, just the usual background noise of medieval existence, as common as a change in the weather. But soon the noise grows. The city gates close a little earlier each night. Travelers are turned away from the inn. Men whisper of death carts, of sudden fevers, of neighbors whose faces turn dark with bruises and who die before their names can be added to the parish rolls. Your nursemaids exchange uneasy glances and pull you indoors at the first sign of dusk. The cooks complain that there are fewer chickens at market, that the butchers are not as cheerful. The priests grow solemn, lingering longer at their prayers. You, of course, are told very little. Children are supposed to be protected from the truth, though no one truly believes in such protection. Instead, you absorb the change in atmosphere, the tension in the air, the hush in the corridors, the way even the castle dogs seem more anxious, tails lowered, eyes darting. The world contracts around you, drawing its borders ever tighter, as if shrinking can somehow keep out what is coming. Soon, you are no longer allowed outside. The castle gates are shut, the drawbridge rarely lowered. The air grows thick and stagnant in the great halls. The smell of burning herbs, sage, rosemary, sometimes simply dung, fills every room. You begin to hate the scent, though you are told it is for your own good. Everyone is afraid of the bad air, the invisible miasma that supposedly carries death on its breath. Windows are closed tight, heavy curtains drawn, as if darkness itself can form a shield. The first to fall ill is not a stranger, but a servant you know by name. She begins coughing, a deep and rattling sound that echoes through the lower hallways. Within days, she is gone, her absence explained in the softest of voices. Then a stable boy, then a cook, then a knight who dined with you only the previous evening. You count the faces at dinner and realize, with a chill, that their number is shrinking. The physicians become frequent visitors. They arrive with more relics, more posies, more bottles of vinegar and salt. They offer contradictory advice: burn more herbs, open the windows, close the windows, wash your hands, do not touch your face, avoid cold drafts, drink only wine. Their confidence is as fragile as you have ever seen it, their voices brittle, their hands unsteady. Occasionally, you catch a flicker of real fear in their eyes. Quarantine is a word you learn early. The sick are moved to a distant wing, their doors sealed with red cloth. Food is left outside. Prayers are whispered through keyholes, and no one expects to see them return. Servants who tend the ill are kept separate, their faces pale and thin, their clothes stinking of vinegar. Your parents argue about what should be done, flee to the country, stay in the castle, send you away to distant relatives, but nowhere feels safe, and travel is as dangerous as staying put. You, meanwhile, wait. You count the hours in a day, mark them by the chiming of bells and the movement of sunlight on your walls. The castle, usually a place of noise and bustle, is now heavy with silence. Every cough, every sneeze, every fever is cause for alarm. People walk with their eyes averted, as if afraid their gaze might transmit the sickness. Eventually, the disease comes for someone you love. Your tutor, the one who always smelled faintly of ink and old apples, is taken ill. You are not allowed to visit. You listen at the door, straining to hear his voice, but the only sound is the low, steady chanting of a priest. When you are told he has died, it is with the same weary resignation you have heard too often now. You try to remember his face, but already it is fading, replaced by the new normal of empty chairs and unfinished lessons. Outside, the world does not care. You hear that the city is filled with the wail of bells, that bodies are burned or thrown in pits, that the fields lie fallow for want of laborers. The plague, or whatever name the priests and physicians settle on, is no respecter of rank or piety. Rich and poor else vanish in a matter of days. You hear of towns emptied overnight, of whole families wiped out. Some say it is God's punishment. Others blame the stars, or witches, or the Jews, or the foreigners. Blame is as common as death, and just as futile. In the heart of it, you become philosophical. You think about the random cruelty of fate, the pointlessness of privilege, the way death walks through locked doors and stone walls with equal ease. You see the truth, harsh and simple. The epidemic is not just a tragedy, but an education. You understand now that safety is an illusion, that luck is all that separates you from the faces disappearing around you. And so, you survive. You wash your hands in vinegar, wear a pouch of rosemary around your neck, avoid touching your face. You pray, if only because everyone else is praying. Each morning you awake, surprised to find yourself still alive. You have learned to listen for the sound of footsteps in the corridor, because as long as there are footsteps, as long as there are voices, there is still a world outside your own fevered thoughts. In the end, the epidemic burns itself out, or perhaps simply moves on. The survivors are left to rebuild, to mourn, to tally the missing. You are not the same. None of you are. The world is quieter now, more fragile. You do not speak of the dead, except in the ritual phrases required at meals and prayers. Instead, you move forward, one foot in front of the other, grateful in a dull, exhausted way for each day that does not end in fever or silence. But you know, deep down, that it will come again. It always does. Survival in your world is not a reward, it is a lesson, one that you learn with every shadow cast across your chamber door and every silent seat at the banquet table. Fear is the true tutor, and you, diligent student that you are, become fluent in its many dialects. By now, you understand that the business of living is less about triumph and more about sidestepping disaster, a nimble dance performed to the grim tune of chance. You become careful. Some might even say superstitious. But in an age when medicine and magic are indistinguishable, caution is the most sensible virtue. You will not drink from any cup you have not watched filled. Your meals, already suspect, are approached with a scholar's scrutiny. Anything with a sour smell or too much sauce is quietly pushed aside. You have watched enough noblemen fall to a surfeit or a misjudged bite to know that hunger, for all its discomfort, is preferable to death. Water is a perennial concern. You recall, with an odd clarity, the time the well in the lower courtyard ran brown after a storm. The servants murmured of curses and poisoned earth, but you knew by then that simple filth was explanation enough. Wine is safer, at least in theory, and so you develop a taste for sour reds and thin whites long before it is considered appropriate for your age. You learn to distrust sweetness, rot hides beneath it. In both food and people, you choose your company with the same care. The great halls of your childhood are forever filled with people, but not all are equally safe. The merchant from the south with a hacking cough, the visiting knight whose cheeks are too flushed, the priest who always smells faintly of sickness. You keep your distance from them all. If anyone remarks on your aloofness, you smile and blame shyness, a noble trait in a child. You know the truth. Disease travels faster than gossip, and both are deadly. Of course, none of this guarantees safety. No amount of caution can repel the invisible. One day, You find a rash on your arm and spend the afternoon convinced it is the first sign of the pox. Another night, a bout of shivering convinces you the plague has come back for you specifically. Your nursemaid assures you it is nothing, but her eyes linger on your skin a moment too long, and you do not sleep soundly for weeks. You become an expert in symptoms, yours and others. A cough is cataloged, a limp noted, a pallor recorded. You ask careful questions of those around you, trying to map the ever shifting border between wellness and danger. If someone falls ill, you remember their habits, what they ate, where they sat, who they spoke to. You begin to think in patterns, tracking outbreaks as if they are storms to be watched from a safe distance. If only you could predict the next strike. Fear makes you wise, or at least vigilant. Your mother says you are too serious, that children should laugh more. But you know laughter draws the eye of fate. You are not alone in your caution. Among the adults, survival is a discipline. Servants carry bundles of dried herbs. Nobles whisper prayers over their food. Priests increase the frequency of their incantations. The castle is a warren of rituals and small avoidances. You add your own, knocking wood, tying charms, sleeping with your head facing north. Logic and magic are tools, not enemies. Even your dreams are colored by caution. You dream of corridors filled with smoke, of banquet tables laden with spoiled meat, of dark waters rising from the well. Sometimes you see the faces of the dead, your tutor, the servant girl, the cousin who vanished after one too many sneezes, watching you from the shadows. You wake, heart pounding, only to find the same shadows lurking at the edges of your chamber. Yet in all this, there is a kind of strength. Fear makes you attentive. It sharpens your senses, teaches you to listen for subtle changes in the air, to recognize the creak of a floorboard as something ordinary and not a herald of doom. You know intimately the difference between the fever of a sleepless night and the chill of something worse. Your body becomes your barometer. You are always alert, always scanning, always calculating the odds. When your father hosts a feast, you watch the assembly with the eye of a chess player who sneezed, who left early, who has not touched their food. The politics of the court are to you inseparable from the politics of disease. Alliances are made and sometimes broken by the simple fact of who survives and who does not. It is, perhaps, a lonely way to live. But then life itself is lonely, surrounded by the constant company of risk. You learn to find comfort in small things. The feel of clean linen, rare but all the more precious. The warmth of the hearth on a bitter night. The quiet companionship of a book or a friendly dog. Each ordinary pleasure is cherished because you know it could be the last. Your childhood is a catalog of near misses and small victories. Each illness survived is a lesson, each funeral a warning. You understand now that wisdom is not about knowing answers, but about learning which questions to ask and which dangers to avoid. You are not fearless, but you are practiced. You carry your fear like a shield, never heavy enough to slow you, but always present, always polished to a mirror shine. This is how you grow, not through comfort or ignorance, but through the discipline of fear, the wisdom of caution, and the quiet, persistent hope that tomorrow you will be just wise enough to outlast whatever new danger the world has prepared for. You, by the standards of your age, reaching 30 years, is not simply a sign of survival, it is a sort of suspicious achievement. In the narrow, drafty world you inhabit, most faces are either painfully young or hauntingly old, with few in between. You become aware, with a mixture of pride and dread, that every new wrinkle or gray hair marks you not just as lucky, but as potentially cursed. You have, somehow, outwitted the fates that claimed so many before you. The world begins to treat you as if you are both an oracle and a warning. Your body, meanwhile, betrays you in new ways. Gone are the simple miseries of childhood, the fevers, the rashes, the coughs that passed with the season. In their place comes a slower, duller siege. Your joints begin to ache, especially on damp mornings. Your back is stiff when you rise from bed. Your teeth, always suspect, loosen and ache, a constant reminder that rot is not confined to bread and meat alone. You find yourself rubbing your knees, pausing on the stairs, envying the careless energy of the youngest pages as they dash through the corridors. You are not alone. Around you, the signs of age are everywhere: limps and hunched shoulders, hands gnarled like the roots of old trees, faces marked by a web of fine lines. Old age is, in your world, a diagnosis in itself, and a dangerous one. Nobody trusts a body that has seen too many winters. He is failing, they say, as if aging were a moral shortcoming, as if the world expects all things to end cleanly, swiftly, preferably before the embarrassment of decrepitude sets in. The physicians, of course, have opinions. They speak of black bile, melancholy, and an excess of cold humors. They prescribe hot baths, sometimes when they are feeling modern, or advocate for more vigorous bleeding, as if the problem is that you are simply too full of yourself. Their treatments are variations on a theme: hot, cold, wet, dry, always with a side of prayer and a touch of resignation. You comply, mostly because you have learned that their rituals comfort others more than they heal you. There is an unspoken suspicion, especially among the young, that growing old is unnatural. They watch you for signs that you are becoming strange, forgetting names, repeating stories, staring too long at the fire. When you pause in conversation, searching for a word, there are quick glances exchanged behind your back. You recognize the look, a mixture of pity, fear, and calculation. After all, every day you persist is a day someone else waits to inherit your seat. You notice, too, that your place at the table subtly shifts. Younger men speak more boldly. The advice you once gave freely is now politely ignored. The world does not value the experience of survival, not when it reminds them that they too will one day bend and break. You remember when your own father grew slow, his voice more cautious, his hands unsteady on the wine cup. You see him now in the mirror and wonder when the change began. Sleep, once a refuge, becomes treacherous. You wake often, plagued by strange aches and dreams crowded with faces from your past. Some mornings, your heart stutters in your chest, and you lie still, waiting to see if this is the day you do not rise. There are nights when you cannot breathe easily, when your chest feels heavy and your mind races with the memory of every pain and close call. Each day is a rehearsal for dying, though you never say so aloud. You find yourself thinking often of the dead, the ones who left quickly, with little warning, are envied in a strange way. No lingering, no public decline, no endless waiting for the world to move on without you. Those who linger, who become thin and confused, who are carried to the chapel by nervous servants, are mourned before they are gone. The castle is filled with ghosts, not just of people, but of possibilities, what you might have been if you had not lived long enough to feel your body falter. The remedies for age are as superstitious as those for the plague. You wear amulets against the chill, sleep with your feet to the fire, sip broths filled with bones and roots. You learn to cherish small comforts, a soft pillow, a gentle hand, the sound of laughter in another room. When pain becomes too much, you accept it with a stoicism learned from years of disappointment. Complaining only brings pity, and pity is the final insult. Society, for all its reverence for lineage and inheritance, has little patience for decline. Old age is a liminal state, no longer fully alive, not yet truly gone. You become a shadow at your own table, a necessary presence that nobody quite knows how to address. The young avoid your gaze, fearing they might catch your fate. The old gather in corners, trading remedies and stories of better days, as if memory alone could stave off the inevitable. Yet, despite the indignity of it all, there is a strange freedom in growing old. You are less frightened now by the sudden threat of illness. You have already faced so many. Your enemies are slow and patient. You learn to ignore the whispers, to savor the pleasures that remain. You take pleasure in small victories, climbing a flight of stairs, finishing a meal, remembering a name. These are triumphs, each one a denial of the decline that others expect. You realize, too, that your perspective has shifted. Once you saw age as a failure, a failing of will or faith. Now you see it as a badge, a sign that you have survived the world's worst. Each wrinkle is a record, each ache a testament. You are no longer running from death, but walking toward it with the knowledge that you have already outlasted so many others. In your world, to grow old is to live with a diagnosis for which there is no cure. It is a quiet, daily struggle, made bearable only by routine, memory, and the stubborn hope that the worst is still behind you. You greet each day as a victory, each night as a challenge, and learn to live, not in defiance of age, but in quiet conversation with it. For now, at least, you endure. You have reached an age when every new ache in your body is a reminder of something final. The physicians are frequent guests at your table now, and they come bearing promises almost as old as suffering itself. The promise that death can be kept at bay if only you are willing to pay, to swallow, to believe. If you once doubted the power of hope, you are now an expert in its bitter taste. You spend more gold than you care to count on these men of science, faith, and, let us be honest, desperation. The best minds in Christendom are summoned to your court, each trailing their own peculiar arsenal of books, bottles, and beliefs. There is the Italian doctor who swears by Mercury, the Parisian who extols the virtues of powdered gemstones, the German with his heated debates about the correct humors, and the Englishman who imports the most exotic herbs known to man, though you suspect most come from the nearest hedgerow. They each have a cure, and they each have a price. You have drunk the elixirs, endured the purges, consented to bleedings so frequent you feel as though your very spirit is being drained along with your blood. There are tonics for strength, balms for pain, syrups for sleep, and more than a few brews that promise virility, clarity, or, most dangerously, longevity. None of them do what they promise. You endure the side effects in silence, chalking it up to the cost of defiance. You have, like many princes before you, flirted with the notion of immortality. The idea lingers at the edge of every physician's pitch, every alchemist's claim. There is talk of the philosopher's stone, of quintessence, of waters from hidden springs, and secret powders from the east. You meet men who spend their lives in smoke filled laboratories, grinding lead and sulfur, staring into bubbling cauldrons, in the hope that gold or eternity will rise from the mess. They assure you that immortality is almost within reach. Just one more experiment, one more rare ingredient, one more season of patience. You listen with an expression of polite skepticism. You fund their searches, partly out of curiosity, partly out of the faint, lingering wish that there might be something to it all. You remember the stories you were told as a child, of saints who lived for centuries, of kings who walked the earth long after their time should have ended. You understand now that these were just stories. Still, you are human enough to want to believe. The clergy, of course, view these attempts with suspicion. To them, medicine is only valid when it is wrapped in prayer. Your confessor scolds you for putting faith in mortal hands, reminding you that only God grants life or takes it away. The line between healing and heresy is thin, and you walk it with the weary confidence of one who has nothing left to lose. After all, you have seen what happens when faith alone is left to do battle with disease. The endless funerals, the silent weeping, the sense of helplessness that fills every church and chapel. Sometimes, late at night, you wonder if your search for longevity is really a search for control. All your life, you have been subject to the whims of invisible enemies, plagues, fevers, unseen poisons. What you crave most is not immortality, but agency. You want to decide just once when the end will come. You want to choose something, anything, in a world that offers so little choice. Yet the body will not be persuaded. It is, in the end, your truest and least loyal subject. It responds to medicine with stubborn indifference. A sore joint here, a headache there, a fatigue that clings like a damp cloak. Some days you almost feel well, others you cannot rise from your bed. The physicians call this melancholy, or the effects of age, or an imbalance of humors. You call it what it is, the slow erosion of being alive. You become cynical about cures. You watch your friends and rivals chase after the same promises, see them spend fortunes on doctors and charlatans, see them waste away regardless. Some seek out relics, sleep with bones of saints beneath their pillows, undertake long pilgrimages in hope of divine intervention. Others put their trust in astrology, living by the stars, refusing food or drink unless the signs are right. You try a little of everything, not out of conviction, but because there is nothing left but hope. Hope, you discover, is a kind of sickness itself. It keeps you moving from one treatment to the next, one disappointment to another. It leaves you open to the manipulations of men with clever words and empty hands. You learn to keep your hope private, to nod gravely at each new proposal, to pretend, for the sake of those around you, that you still believe. But in your quietest moments, you know the truth. Medicine is, at best, a stalling tactic, a way to buy a little time, a little comfort. Death is patient. It waits behind every locked door and under every heavy coverlet. You realize that immortality is not a matter of magic or science, but of memory. You will persist, if at all, not in your own body, but in the stories others tell once you are gone. And so, as another year passes, you resign yourself to the slow, uneven contest between medicine and mortality. You keep the physicians close, if only to reassure those who love you. You drink your potions, suffer your bleedings, wear your charms. You continue the search, knowing you will never find what you truly want, a cure for the human condition itself. This, in the end, is the lesson of age and illness, that all the gold, all the power, all the wisdom of your age cannot defeat the simple fact of being alive. You endure, not because you expect to win, but because, as always, there is nothing else to do but fight the darkness a little longer and hope that you leave behind a story worth remembering. If death has many faces, you know now that one of them is shaped like duty, the fantasy of a medieval king lounging in silks, feasting in warm halls, issuing orders from a comfortable throne, is as hollow as a winter wind. Your days, and especially your nights, are spent in the labor of survival, which is to say, in the endless business of ruling. Work, you discover, is itself a kind of illness, one that creeps into the bones, sours the stomach, and leaves the heart heavy long after the council chamber has emptied. From the moment you open your eyes in the gray half-light, the day presses in with petitions and problems. Ambassadors want your time, bishops your gold, nobles your favor. You sign edicts until your hand cramps, argue policy until your head aches, endure hours of listening to men whose voices are weapons. Your body, always your reluctant ally, responds with new indignities, a pulse that races at bad news, hands that shake during arguments, sweat that soaks your linen even in the dead of winter. Travel is worse. Ruling a patchwork of lands means you are always in motion, always on the road to somewhere colder, damper, and more uncomfortable than the last. Your body does not thrive on these journeys. The carriages are jarring, the inns always suspiciously dirty, the food unfamiliar and frequently dangerous. You sleep in borrowed beds, haunted by drafts and lice, lulled to a shallow, unsatisfying rest by the groans of your aging frame. Yet there is no rest at home either. The castle is a hive of needs, and you are expected to know every corner of it: the state of the larder, the mood of the guards, the balance of the treasury, the subtle shifts in alliances that could turn a neighbor into an enemy with a single misplaced word. Even your own household is a battlefield. Quarrels between your courtiers fester like wounds. You are always patching things up, never truly healing them. You try, now and then, to set aside a day for recovery, a morning spent reading, an afternoon in the chapel, an evening with music or chess. But peace is a thin blanket against the cold drafts of responsibility. There is always another knock at the door, another letter to be read, another dispute to mediate before it turns into open war. And so you push your body further, telling yourself that strength is a matter of will, that the king cannot afford to be weak. But your body keeps a ledger of debts. The fevers come more often, lingering longer. A persistent cough becomes a familiar companion, sometimes sharp, sometimes just a dull ache beneath your ribs. The pain in your back spreads to your legs. The stiffness in your joints grows each season. The physicians urge you to rest, but even their voices are tinged with the knowledge that the state cannot wait for you to recover. Your mind aches with the same fatigue as your body, a thick fog that settles over every thought, clouding judgment, sapping resolve. Other rulers die suddenly, struck down in battle or poisoned or taken by a swift fever. You are not so lucky. Instead, you are ground down by the slow erosion of endless work, by the attrition of cares that never seem to lessen, no matter how much you delegate or decree. You begin to envy those who died quickly, their troubles buried with them. You catch yourself thinking of rest as a distant country, one you may never visit. And still, the world demands more. The sick come to you for justice, the poor for relief, the clergy for support. Famine, war, pestilence, each arrives at your door with regularity, as if you had personally invited them to stay. You must keep your face calm, your words measured. Weakness is not permitted, not even in private. Even the smallest hesitation can be used against you, and every gesture is watched for signs of decline. Your enemies wait for cracks to show. They know that rulers, like castles, eventually crumble from within. You steel yourself against them, but the effort is exhausting. The mask you wear becomes heavier each day, the burden of rule pressing on your chest until every breath feels hard won. You realize, with a bitterness born of too many sleepless nights, that power is its own affliction. You have seen men driven mad by the pressure, have watched trusted advisors age 10 years in a single season. Even in the company of allies, you are alone with your responsibilities. No one else can carry your fears. No one else can feel the slow decay eating at your core. The priests offer comfort in the form of ritual, but their prayers are thin consolation. The physicians offer their usual arsenal: herbs for sleep, tonics for pain, bleeding for everything. None of it can ease the weight of rule or the certainty that every day you delay, another part of you is lost to exhaustion. In the end, you are not killed by a single blow, but by 1,000 small wounds. Each hour of anxiety, each night without rest, each demand that must be met before your own needs. You keep going, not because you expect to win, but because you cannot imagine stopping. The work is endless, and so is your stubbornness. If there is wisdom in this, it is the realization that every king is, in the end, as mortal as his subjects. No edict, no treaty, no brilliant maneuver can shield you from the slow violence of your own body turning against you. You understand now that history will remember your victories and your failures, but not the private toll exacted by duty. The way work, relentless and unseen, can be the most patient of killers. After enough seasons, enough sieges, enough banquets that turn into vigils, illness stops being an unexpected guest and becomes a member of your household. You develop a peculiar intimacy with pain, with fatigue, with the strange aches that move around your body as unpredictably as politics itself. The sharp terrors of childhood fevers have faded. What remains are the dull, persistent complaints of a body that is no longer interested in your ambitions. You learn to recognize the early signs: the distant pounding in your temples, the stiffness that greets you before dawn, the way your hands tremble ever so slightly as you reach for the ink pot. These are not emergencies, merely companions. They arrive, settle in, and more often than not, refuse to leave. You name them: melancholy, gout, indigestion, sleeplessness. You find yourself addressing your pain as if it is an old acquaintance, half in jest and half in resignation. Each day brings a small negotiation. Will you be able to rise from bed? Will your knees support you as you walk the long corridor to the council chamber? Will you be able to swallow the thick, greasy stew that is placed before you, or will your stomach rebel again, demanding nothing but thin broth and quiet? There is a certain skill to navigating the boundaries of your own body, learning to anticipate what it will tolerate and when it will refuse to cooperate. The physicians are never far away, and their advice is both constant and contradictory. For pain in the joints, there are heated poultices and baths infused with mysterious herbs, some soothing, most simply wet and heavy. For the trembling in your hands, There are powders to mix with wine and endless theories about imbalanced humors. For the persistent, gnawing discomfort in your belly, they recommend everything from fasting to feasting, depending on their own recent readings or which ancient authority is most in fashion that week. You grow adept at pretending to follow their advice, at sipping the bitter infusions and nodding gravely while plotting your own course. You know, by now, that most remedies do little good, and some do real harm. The only thing you trust is time. Time to rest, time to recover, time to wait out whatever storm has found you. If the illness passes, you give credit to the latest concoction and let the physician believe in his own skill. If it lingers, you bear it in silence, knowing there is nothing more to be done. The worst of it is the unpredictability. There are days when you wake feeling almost well, as if the years have lifted from your shoulders. You walk with a spring in your step, eat with appetite, and almost believe that you have turned a corner. But by evening, the familiar aches return, heavier than before. Other days, you feel so burdened by fatigue that even breathing feels like effort. You wonder if you are dying, only to wake the next morning with nothing more than a mild headache and a sense of grim amusement. Your afflictions become part of your identity. Courtiers and family members exchange knowing glances when you wince or pause in mid sentence. They develop their own rituals of sympathy, offering you cushions, asking after your rest, whispering recommendations for new healers or exotic remedies. Some are sincere in their concern, others are simply waiting for you to falter. You learn to accept the attention with grace, neither encouraging nor discouraging it. Illness, after all, is as much a matter of performance as politics. At night, the pain is often worse. The distractions of the day fall away, leaving you alone with the creaking of your bones and the anxious racing of your mind. Sleep comes in fits, broken by sweats and chills, by dreams of past mistakes and losses yet to come. You become acquainted with the slow march of hours between midnight and dawn, each minute counted out in discomfort. Sometimes you light a candle and read, though the words blur and the page seems to mock you with its clarity. Yet, for all its burdens, chronic illness teaches a strange patience. You become a connoisseur of small comforts: the right angle of a pillow, the warmth of a woolen blanket, the rare taste of clear water. You notice things that others miss: a ray of sunlight on stone, the gentle weight of a dog's head in your lap, the softness of well-worn linen. These moments are not victories, but brief truces in an endless war. You savor them, knowing how few and far between they are. There is, too, a certain camaraderie among the afflicted. You seek out the company of those who share your burdens, trading complaints and remedies in whispers at the edge of feasts and ceremonies. You laugh quietly at the optimism of the young and the ignorance of those who have not yet felt their own bodies betray them. You develop a sense of irony, a humor sharpened by pain, and learn to hide your true discomfort behind carefully chosen words. With time, Your illnesses become less frightening, though no less real. You stop fearing death in every new symptom. Stop hoping for miracles from every new treatment. You accept, with a mix of resignation and relief, that this is your life now, a series of accommodations, a daily dance with pain. The body may fail, but the mind endures, growing sharper with each disappointment, each lesson in humility. Perhaps this is the final wisdom of age and suffering, not the hope of cure, but the art of coexistence. You learn to live with your ailments, to carry them lightly when you can, and to bow beneath their weight when you must. They are your familiar friends, your silent companions on the slow journey toward whatever ending awaits. And so you persist, not in spite of your chronic illnesses, but alongside them, an uneasy alliance, a truce negotiated anew with every sunrise. The world outside may judge you by your vigor, your decisions, your legacy. You, however, have learned to measure your days in the quiet triumphs of endurance and in the bitter, essential honesty of simply continuing on. You have learned to live with your pains, your weariness, your stubborn and muttering body, but all the wisdom, all the caution, all the small rituals of self preservation cannot save you from what returns again and again to remind you how little your effort matters. The next epidemic, sweeping in like a storm to wash away the boundaries between privilege and poverty, youth and age, preparation and chance. It does not begin with a proclamation, but with a murmur. There is a report from the kitchens. A scullery maid has taken to her bed with a fever, her face flushed, her breath rattling. The nursemaid says, "It is nothing, the change of season." But you see how she touches wood as she speaks, how she crosses herself when she thinks no one is looking. Soon there are more: a groom in the stables, a cook's assistant, a guard who suddenly cannot stand, then cannot speak. The castle, always restless with gossip, falls into a hush broken only by the distant tolling of bells. You have seen this before: the smell of smoke and vinegar, the sound of distant weeping, the way every conversation drops to a whisper when you approach. You know how the rooms are rearranged to create isolation: sick rooms set apart, servants forbidden from crossing certain thresholds. Trays of food are left outside doors and retrieved by trembling hands. The air fills with the sharp, sour tang of burning herbs and the constant undercurrent of fear. The physicians arrive, grave and busy, their faces pinched with fatigue and anxiety. They bring with them new concoctions and old assurances, potions to drive out the bad humors, salves for the fever, prayers for God's mercy. Each one gives advice at odds with the last. Keep the windows closed, let in the fresh air, burn rosemary in every room, sprinkle holy water on the sheets. You listen to them all because the alternative, doing nothing, is unthinkable, and yet you know from long experience that their advice is little more than a ritual for passing the time. Your court changes. Meetings are shorter, attended by fewer people. The great hall, once filled with the laughter and bickering of nobles and attendants, now echoes with silence and the shuffle of cautious feet. Food is served cold, in haste, with everyone sitting at arm's length, eyes fixed on their plates. Conversations are brief, voices strained. You notice who avoids whom, who coughs into a sleeve, who looks a little too pale, a little too thin. You notice, too, the new faces of fear, men and women who once prided themselves on reason, now muttering about omens and curses. The days blend together, each one an inventory of symptoms and absences. You wake to find another servant gone, their bed stripped and aired, their name whispered only in prayers. Some disappear quietly, their absence marked by little more than an extra place at table. Others go noisily, racked with coughs, their suffering a public torment. You attend the required masses, kneeling in a sea of anxious bodies, the air thick with incense and whispered petitions. The boundaries between living and dying blur. You begin to dream of sickness, of rooms filling with black water, of faces you cannot quite recognize, of hands reaching for you from the darkness. In your waking hours, your own body turns traitor. You are feverish one day, cold and shaking the next. Every cough, every pain is magnified by your fear until you cannot tell whether you are truly ill or simply afraid. Old friends vanish. Trusted advisors, men and women who have weathered decades by your side, are struck down with shocking swiftness. Their absence is more than personal. It is a breach in your defenses, a thinning of the fragile wall that keeps chaos at bay. You try to keep up the routines, but each day feels more hollow. The rituals you once found comforting now seem empty, powerless against the relentless advance of the disease. You are haunted by memories of earlier epidemics, the way people changed, the bitterness of mourning interrupted by the need to move on. You remember how, in the aftermath, the survivors emerged dazed and changed, their laughter quieter, their ambitions blunted. You know that if you survive this time, it will be as a different person, a little more cautious, a little more tired, a little less willing to hope. You try to lead by example, to appear calm and steady, but your hands tremble when you lift your cup, and your voice grows hoarse with every speech. The truth is plain. You are as frightened as anyone, more so, perhaps, because you understand just how thin the thread of survival really is. You see the shape of your own mortality coming closer each day, impossible to outmaneuver. In the worst nights, when sleep will not come, you walk the dark corridors of the castle, listening to the muffled coughs, the quiet weeping behind closed doors. The silence is heavy, punctuated only by the occasional footstep or the sudden, sharp clang of a dropped bucket. You pass the chapel and see the priest, half asleep in his robes, lighting candles for the dying. There is no clear turning point, no announcement that the epidemic is over. It recedes as it arrived, leaving behind empty rooms, lighter tables, a sense of collective exhaustion. The survivors look at one another with wary relief, counting losses, not victories. You are left with the familiar companions of pain, fatigue, and memory, and with the new knowledge that each escape is only temporary. You feel older now, not just in body, but in spirit. Each epidemic is both an ending and a rehearsal for the final one. You continue because you must, stepping carefully over the invisible graves of those who have gone before, marking the days not with hope, but with the grim, persistent determination of one who has seen the world survive itself again and again and again. There comes a season when the darkness does not lift, when even the most reliable routines of your life, rising with the sun, eating at fixed hours, the nightly prayers, begin to unravel. The castle's great stone walls no longer feel like protection. They are simply the edges of a shrinking world, a world in which sickness and anxiety have become your closest companions. Sleep, which was once a temporary escape, is now as elusive as a cure for mortality. Your nights are long, and each one is longer than the last. You lie in bed, listening to the sounds that echo through the castle, the distant howling of the wind, the soft footsteps of servants moving through the halls, the rustle of mice in the walls, the stifled coughs and whimpers from rooms not so far from your own. Your heart beats a little faster every time the silence is broken. The darkness presses down, and you find yourself afraid to close your eyes, afraid of what dreams or fevers might come. Sometimes you drift into uneasy slumber, only to wake shivering, the sheets soaked with sweat, and your mind tangled in a net of nightmares. In your dreams, the castle is filled with shadows, rooms that multiply and twist, staircases that never end, corridors where the faces of the dead watch you with hollow eyes. You reach for your nursemaid or your physician, but they recede into mist. You call out for comfort, and only the echoes answer. The fear of death is no longer a theoretical thing, no longer a distant shadow at the edge of the feast or a rumor whispered in the hallways. It is a presence in the room, a shape at the end of the bed, the cold weight on your chest as you struggle to breathe. There are nights when you are certain that your body has given up, that this shallow, ragged breath will be your last. The more you fear sleep, the harder it becomes to find, and so you spend hour after hour in a gray half world between exhaustion and dread. Priests come more often now. You have always been familiar with their rituals, their prayers and mutterings, the thin comfort of their reassurances. But these days, they seem as weary as you are. Their eyes are ringed with sleeplessness, their words more mechanical. They speak of penance, of the need to confess, of putting your spiritual affairs in order. They urge you to consider your soul, as if they have seen enough deaths recently to know that the time for such things is always soon. It is not only your mind that betrays you, but your body as well. The old pains have sharpened. Your limbs feel heavier, your breath shorter, your heart pounding unevenly at odd moments. You try to read, but the words blur. You try to pray, but your mind wanders. The simple act of turning over in bed becomes a contest between will and weakness. Your hands, once steady, now tremble when you reach for the cup of water by your bedside. The servants, those few who have remained, are quieter too. They move through your chamber like ghosts, their faces tight with worry, their steps muffled by years of habit and recent fear. You catch them glancing at you, quickly looking away if you return their gaze. You wonder what stories they are telling each other at night, how long the king will last, whether the next heir will be kinder, whether the plague will claim the castle once and for all. Sometimes, in the early hours, you get up and walk the corridors, your robe clutched tightly around your thin frame. The chill of the flagstones bites at your feet, but the movement calms you, at least for a little while. The great halls are emptier than you have ever seen them, the firelight throwing long, flickering shadows. The tapestries, once proud with scenes of battle and glory, seem muted, faded by time and neglect. Every echo is a reminder of all the voices you have lost. Your world narrows. Meals, when you take them, are brief and unsatisfying, the food tasteless and the wine burning in your throat. You tire quickly, even of conversation. The letters you used to read, petitions, complaints, news from the frontiers, now sit unopened on your table. The work of rule, which once seemed endless and essential, now feels like a play staged for an absent audience. Even the ceremonies of power have become pale imitations, attended by fewer and fewer faces, everyone desperate to avoid the contagion that might lurk behind your cough or your silence. And always there is the fear, not just of dying, but of what comes before, of losing yourself, your mind wandering into confusion, your body becoming an object for others to tend and pity. You dread the prospect of a slow decline, of lingering on as a burden or a warning to others. You wonder if your name will be remembered for what you built or for how you ended. Every day, you mark the distance between the person you once were and the body you now inhabit. Yet, even in this darkness, there are moments of strange clarity. You remember things you thought you had forgotten. The warmth of the sun on your face as a boy, the laughter of your sister, the comfort of your mother's voice humming you to sleep. These memories are fragile, flickering in the gloom, but they are more real than the pain or the fear. You hold them close, like embers against the coming night. Sleep, when it comes, is not peace, but surrender. Each time you close your eyes, you wonder if you will open them again. Each morning, when the gray light filters through the cracks in the shutters, you are quietly surprised to find yourself still breathing. You count the days not by triumphs or pleasures, but by endurance, by the simple, stubborn fact of survival. In the end, your world has shrunk to the size of your chamber, your days measured in hours of darkness and slivers of hope. Fear of death is your constant companion now, but even as it sits beside you, you discover that you are not wholly defeated. You are still here, still breathing, still waiting for what comes next. There is a kind of bravery in this, a defiance born of sleepless nights and unrelenting fear. You do not welcome death, but you no longer flee it either. You simply endure, one sleepless night at a time. You always imagined that death would come with spectacle, a moment suited to the dramas of history, a final word, a gathered audience, the doors flung open to heaven or hell. The reality is less theatrical and more exhausting. It is not a sudden storm, but a slow, relentless surrender, your body, bit by bit, raising the white flag. There is a morning when you know, with a certainty that cannot be shaken, that you are finished fighting. The aches, the chills, the darkness in your mind, they are no longer visitations, but the whole substance of your days. You cannot rise from your bed. The sunlight leaking through the window is no longer an invitation to greet the world, but a reminder that the world continues without you. Your body rebels in new ways. Your hands, once steady enough to sign decrees and wield a sword, now tremble even when holding a spoon. Your legs have forgotten the memory of walking. They are stiff and swollen, the skin stretched thin over bone and blue veins. There are ulcers on your feet, dark and slow to heal, and your back aches from the unyielding mattress, no matter how many times the servants turn it. Breath comes hard, in shallow, uneven sips. The familiar rooms spin if you so much as shift on your pillow. Eating is no longer a pleasure or even a routine, but a chore, each swallow a small trial. The simplest broth leaves you nauseated. Your lips crack, your tongue feels thick, and even water is too heavy a burden. There are days when you refuse food altogether, only to regret it at night, when weakness leaves you lightheaded and hallucinating. Sleep, that old adversary, becomes a strange blessing and a cruel torment. When it comes, you slip under like a stone falling through water, surfacing hours later with no sense of time past. When it will not come, you count the minutes by the sound of your own ragged breathing, the scrape of a chair in the next room, the creak of old timber in the roof above. You dream in snatches, faces you have lost, places you once ruled, the distant echo of laughter you can no longer summon. Conversations shrink to necessities. You have nothing left to say about politics, about war, about the alliances and betrayals that once filled your every waking hour. Instead, you ask after the weather, the welfare of distant kin, the small affairs of the household. Even these answers are hard to grasp. Your mind wanders, your memory clouds over. Sometimes you lose track of what you are saying halfway through a sentence, and you see the discomfort ripple across the faces of those listening. Around you, the world grows smaller. The grand halls, the echoing corridors, the busy courtyards, now they might as well not exist. All that matters is the room in which you lie, the window with its thin slice of sky, the chair by your bed where visitors perch, awkward and ill at ease. The priests come daily now. They speak in gentle voices, offering words meant to soothe, but their presence is a reminder that the end is near, that their work is almost done. Your attendants do what they can. They change your linens, bathe your aching limbs, coax you to drink or eat. Their kindness is a mixture of duty and genuine sorrow. You see them exchange looks over your bed, hear them whisper in the corridor. Some are afraid for their livelihoods, some are simply afraid. You are grateful for their care, but you also long for privacy, for dignity, the one thing illness always takes, the one thing the dying rarely retain. You notice the way your world has become an endless cycle of small humiliations, the loss of privacy, the indignity of needing to be fed and washed, the way your body is handled as if it no longer belongs to you. You cannot keep track of time. You lose hours to fever, to confusion, to the sluggish drifting between wakefulness and oblivion. Each day, you are a little less yourself. Pain changes too. Where once it was sharp and specific, a joint, a tooth, a headache, now it is diffuse, a dull ache in every bone and muscle, as if your very structure is dissolving. The old remedies are brought out again, but they do little now. The physicians, so certain in their routines, seem resigned, even defeated. You see in their eyes the knowledge that their skill has reached its limit, that you are beyond their art. You wonder about the end. Will it be sudden, a final gasp, a sharp pain, a descent into darkness? Or will it be slow, a gradual fading until nothing is left but memory and rumor? You hope, if you hope for anything, for peace, a gentle slipping away, a release from the fatigue and humiliation, the small humiliations of the dying body. Visitors come to say goodbye. Some linger, some are in and out as quickly as decency allows. Each brings a memory of youth, of power, of the world outside this narrowing room. Each leaves a little heavier, a little more aware of their own mortality. You try to offer comfort, to smile, to nod, but most days you do not have the strength. There are moments of lucidity when you see the past with painful clarity, your crowning, your victories, your failures, the people who have come and gone. You wish sometimes that you could pass on what you have learned, but you know that nobody really listens. Every generation must discover for itself the truth about death, about the futility of struggle, about the strange dignity of endurance. Now you are reduced to waiting. You have fought and bargained and hoped, and now you simply exist, counting out the final days, the final breaths. Your body has surrendered. All that remains is the quiet, persistent awareness of the end approaching, a slow, inexorable tide that nothing can turn back. You are not frightened, or if you are, the fear is dull, worn smooth by repetition. Death is not a stranger any longer, not an enemy to be resisted, but a presence in the room, patient and inevitable. You close your eyes and let the world recede, trusting that whatever comes next is at last beyond pain. The closer you drift toward the end, the more the world around you transforms. You become both the center and the periphery of a somber ritual, an object of concern and calculation, pity and impatience. The court no longer functions as it once did. Conversations, alliances, and rivalries shift from the council chamber to the shadowed corridors Outside your sick room door, you are the sun, but your light is fading, and everyone feels the chill. Your chamber, once just a room, is now the axis of all activity. The air is heavy with the smell of damp linen, burnt herbs, and human anxiety. The heavy curtains are pulled half shut against both drafts, and the prying eyes of servants who hover just beyond the threshold, ready to fetch, carry, or eavesdrop. Someone is always present: a nursemaid tidying, a priest muttering, an old courtier awkwardly waiting for the right moment to speak or for you to die. Outside your door, the world contracts and buzzes. Servants move quietly, their routines upended by your illness. No one wishes to be the one caught idling, but neither does anyone wish to be seen hurrying, for fear it will be interpreted as eagerness for your end. The cooks send up broth and wine, but these are more for show than for nourishment. The castle doctor paces in the hall, consulting with herbalists, apothecaries, and the occasional wise woman brought in from the countryside as a last, superstitious gamble. Your family members are summoned, arriving in waves, some genuinely distressed, others careful to perform the appropriate level of sorrow. Old grievances are set aside, at least for the moment, replaced by a tense anticipation. Those closest to the line of succession are never far, always ready to comfort you with one hand and reach for the future with the other. They speak in hushed tones, weighing every word, as if the wrong syllable might tip you over the edge. You see the careful dance of inheritance playing out at the foot of your bed. Wills are checked and rechecked, titles and lands discussed in whispers. Messengers come and go, carrying news to distant estates and foreign courts. You know there are letters being written that you will never see, decisions being made in rooms you no longer enter. Your death has become an administrative concern, a series of problems to solve and opportunities to seize. The church is never far away. Priests come in pairs now, one to pray, the other to keep records. They bring relics, crucifixes, and scented oils, performing blessings that are both comfort and reminder of your failing state. Sometimes, if you are lucid, they ask after your sins, gently but persistently. You confess, but your mind is a fog. Your regrets are indistinct, your apologies vague. They offer absolution, the same phrases repeated again and again until the words lose meaning. You become a canvas onto which the anxieties of others are painted. Some visitors hope for a miracle, seeing your illness as a test of faith. Others are resigned to your passing, already adjusting to the idea of a new reign. A few, always the most ambitious, see opportunity, and their sympathy rings hollow, their glances sharp. You recognize their type. You once were like them. In quieter moments, when the crowd thins, you are left with the truest companions: the lifelong servant, the silent old nursemaid who knows all your childhood secrets, the priest who remembers your youth, the friend who has already outlived too many. Others, their presence is neither political nor obligatory. They sit with you, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing old memories. Their words are few, but their comfort is real, anchoring you to the world even as you drift from it. Rumors circulate beyond your sick room. The servants' hall is filled with speculation. The city waits for news. The market stalls abuzz with predictions. Merchants calculate who will be favored in the new order, and distant cousins recall old claims and ancient grudges. Even the distant lords and foreign dignitaries are drawn in, sending letters of concern and thinly disguised queries about the future. Meanwhile, the business of the realm goes on. The world does not stop for your suffering. Ambassadors still arrive, bandits still raid, the harvest must still be counted and stored. The council meets, sometimes sending a trusted advisor to report back, sometimes simply waiting for the inevitable. Your seal is used sparingly, your signature forged when absolutely necessary. Each decision now bears the weight of transition, an unspoken question. What happens next? You, the dying king, are at the center of a slow motion storm, a flurry of activity and anticipation. Every cough is noted, every sigh discussed. News of your waking is met with cautious optimism, news of your sleeping with anxious dread. Your body, failing though it is, becomes the most closely watched matter in the land. You are both present and absent, talked about more than talked to, both participant and spectator in the drama of your own decline. The small kindnesses matter most now. The gentle hand adjusting your pillow, the cool cloth against your forehead, the cup of water offered without fanfare. These gestures, so often overlooked in the busy world of power, become your lifeline. You cling to them, knowing that the world beyond your bed is governed by calculation and anxiety. But here, at least, there are moments of genuine care. In the last quiet hours, as the activity beyond your chamber door continues, you sense a strange peace. You see yourself as both king and man, as both memory and presence. The world will go on, as it always has, reshaping itself around your absence. But for now, you are surrounded, not just by intrigue and expectation, but by the simple human presence of those who will witness your final days. If hope is the last thing to die, then medicine is the next to last, an endless parade of remedies that grow ever more desperate as your body fails. Even now, as the world quietly prepares for your end, your physicians refuse to surrender. The drama of your decline is matched only by the spectacle of their treatments. Each new attempt, a peculiar mixture of science, ritual, and wishful thinking. The air in your chamber is thick with the aromas of boiled herbs, scorched feathers, and vinegar. Each morning brings a new procession of hopeful faces, physicians, apothecaries, even a traveling monk who claims to have healed a bishop's gout with the application of river stones and fervent prayer. They argue in hushed Latin at the foot of your bed, offering diagnoses that are less about knowledge and more about prestige. One swears by bloodletting, another by purges, another by the careful balance of planetary influences. No two ever agree. You are bled, again, by a physician who claims that a surfeit of blood is weighing down your heart. The ritual is old and familiar. You grit your teeth as the lancet bites, feeling more like livestock than royalty. The bowl fills, dark and metallic, but you do not feel lighter. If anything, you are weaker, your skin pale, your head swimming. Later, another doctor proposes leeches, as if your illness might retreat before the simple determination of a hungry worm. When the bleeding fails, as it always does, they turn to purging. You drink potions so bitter and caustic, you suspect they were meant as punishment rather than cure. Your stomach rebels, your body trembles, you are forced to endure emetics and laxatives in the hope that something evil might be coaxed out. The chamber pots fill, but your pain does not subside. The physicians study the results with grave faces, as if the answer to your suffering might be written in the filth. Herbs are next. Poultices are wrapped around your chest, your feet, your forehead. Hot compresses and cold washes alternate as various theories are tested and discarded. Rosemary and rue, mustard and sage, each applied with a litany of instructions and a prayer. The air is thick with steam and hope. If you cough, the blame is the wrong combination of plants. If you sweat, perhaps the right one has finally been found. If you do neither, the doctors simply reach for something stranger. Superstition creeps in, too. Holy relics are brought to your bedside, each wrapped in linen and reverence. Fragments of saints' bones, vials of water from distant shrines, strips of cloth said to have touched a martyr's skin, all are pressed into your hands, or tied around your neck, or placed beneath your pillow. Your confessor murmurs blessings, while the court physician mutters about the need for more aggressive bleeding. You are too tired to care. At the edge of science, the healers call in a wise woman from a distant village, a last, unofficial hope. She brings her own arsenal, nettle tea for strength, crushed garlic for the blood, honey and vinegar to ward off infection. Her hands are gentle, her voice practical. She does not promise a cure, only comfort. Some in the court sneer, others watch with furtive hope. You drink her tea, if only because it tastes less poisonous than the doctor's brews. The hours grow heavy. Each new treatment is met with less resistance, not because you believe, but because it hardly matters anymore. The rituals of medicine have become a backdrop to your fading life, a cycle of hopes raised and dashed, of bodies and minds tested past endurance. You watch the physicians with a kind of pity, knowing that they are as helpless as you. Their pride will not let them admit it, so they cling to routines as if effort alone could cheat death. The priest returns with holy oil, marking your brow and chest in a final act of faith. The physicians look away as if embarrassed by the limits of their craft. Someone burns incense in the corner. The smoke curls in the weak sunlight, a thin veil between you and the others. Your skin is clammy, your heart beating unevenly, your mind drifting in and out of clarity. There is nothing left to do but wait. Outside your chamber, the world waits as well. News of each new remedy is carried down the halls, stirring hope for an hour, disappointment by nightfall. Servants speculate about which physician will be blamed, which healer will be remembered. Courtiers practice the art of being present without appearing eager, each watching for the final moment. The truth is now unmistakable. The final battle has been lost. The last treatments, however earnest or elaborate, have served only to underline the futility of the struggle. Each bleeding, each poultice, each whispered blessing is a kind of farewell, a ritual acknowledgement that the body will not be persuaded, that the end is both certain and near. You find a strange relief in this. The war is over, and so is the exhausting cycle of hope and disappointment. All that remains is a quiet, gathering calm. You feel yourself floating free of the expectations of others. No more questions, no more potions, no more desperate faith in things unseen. Just the hush of the room, the low voices of those who have done all they can, and the soft certainty that the final remedy is not in their hands or yours. You are ready, at last, to let go. The end, when it finally comes, is not what you imagined. You have spent a lifetime preparing for grand exits, battles, victories, losses, negotiations played out on the largest stage. But your death is not a matter of banners and trumpets. It is a silent, private event, felt most in the tightening of a hand, the slowing of a breath, the silence that falls over the room and settles into the stones themselves. The last day arrives quietly. The light through the window is dull and pale. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls, perhaps for a mass, perhaps for another soul departing. Your chamber is a still pond of expectation. Those who remain speak only in whispers, their faces blurred by fatigue and resignation. No one is willing to leave, yet everyone is afraid to be too near when the final moment comes, as if death might leap from you to them if they are not careful. You are not alone, but neither are you surrounded in the way a king might wish. A handful of the faithful keep their vigil, a priest, tired and solemn, reciting the last rites, a servant kneeling nearby, lips moving in silent prayer. A few family members, caught between their grief and the anxious calculation of what comes next. Their presence is both comfort and burden. You are aware of them, and yet already slipping away, the world receding in slow, gentle waves. Your senses narrow, sight blurs, colors draining to a smudged gray. Sound becomes distant, as if muffled by snow. The ache in your chest is no longer sharp. Your limbs feel weightless, unmoored from the body that carried you through decades of struggle. Breathing is work, each inhale shallow, each exhale uncertain. There is a moment when you realize you are not afraid. The long, sleepless nights, the pain, the humiliations of illness. These are behind you, or perhaps beneath you, left on the far side of the river you are about to cross. The priest speaks to you softly, the words of the ritual familiar even as they slip past your grasp. He marks your forehead with oil, presses the cross into your palm, offers final absolution. You do not have the strength to answer, but you try, your lips moving in a silent echo of prayers long memorized and often repeated. The ritual is as much for those left behind as for you. You wonder, dimly, if the saints are listening, if your confessions have reached anyone beyond the walls of your chamber. Memories swirl in the twilight of your mind. Faces rise and fall. Your father, grave and distant. Your mother, her hands gentle and cool. Friends lost to war, to politics, to earlier plagues. The laughter of siblings, the songs of distant feasts, the thrill of early victories, and the sorrow of late defeats. You remember fleetingly the feeling of sunlight on your skin, the cool rush of river water, the weight of a crown on your brow. None of these seem real now, and yet they are all that remain. The body gives up its last resistances. There is a coldness that starts in your feet, climbs slowly, inexorably, to your chest, your throat, your mouth. You lose track of time. Minutes become hours. Hours become days. Your eyelids grow heavy, and it takes too much effort to open them. You hear the voices at your bedside, faint, anxious, hopeful. Someone is weeping. Someone is reciting a litany of saints, names you can barely remember. For a brief, lucid instant, you are aware of the room, the flickering candle, the scent of wax and incense, the quiet shuffle of feet, the world held in a tense collective breath. Then everything narrows to a single sensation, a kind of release, a letting go, a slip into water, cool and dark and endless. There is no trumpet, no sign. The hand you were holding goes limp. The watchers pause, unsure if it is truly over, then slowly move to check, to listen, to confirm what they have long expected. The priest closes your eyes and murmurs a prayer. The servant weeps quietly. Your family members exchange glances that are both relieved and burdened, their faces shadowed with the knowledge that the next act has already begun. Outside, the world moves on. The bells toll again. Somewhere in the castle, a new child is born. A meal is prepared. A council convenes. Your death is both an ending and an interruption, another name to be written, another body to be cared for, another memory to be measured against legend and rumor. Inside your chamber, the quiet lingers a little longer. They say the soul hovers for a while after the body fails, uncertain where to go, reluctant to leave behind the world it knew. You do not know if this is true, but if it is, perhaps you remain for a moment, watching the people you loved and ruled, the stones that bore witness to your joys and shames, the fading, uncertain candlelight. Then you, too, are gone. All that is left is silence and the slow turning of history's wheel. Death, for all its finality, rarely brings an ending. Your passing, marked by ritual, observed with a mixture of dread, relief, and routine, becomes just another moment in a world already heavy with loss. The court has barely had time to lower its collective head before the realities of survival reassert themselves. The business of death, it turns out, is as busy and unromantic as the business of life. Your body, so carefully guarded in life, becomes an object of anxious practicality. The physicians, priests, and senior servants gather to confer. It is not only a question of grief, but of contagion. The memory of your last fever is still fresh in their minds. Some say you died of old age, others whisper about the pestilence. Either way, no one is taking chances. Your chamber is fumigated with acrid smoke, the windows thrown wide for the first time in weeks. Bundles of vinegar soaked cloth hung from every hook and ledge. The process of preparing your body is hurried, but wrapped in ceremony. Your skin is washed with spirits and wine. Your hair is combed, the bruises and sores covered as best as possible. Old traditions mix uneasily with new fears. You are dressed in your finest robes, a crown laid at your side. Yet the hands that do the work tremble with haste and caution. The most superstitious servants mutter prayers and avert their eyes, afraid that the soul might linger, offended by such speed. The priests arrive for the final blessings, swinging censers filled with herbs and incense, meant to drive away both evil spirits and bad air. The last sacraments are administered, your name woven into the liturgy for the dying, your lineage invoked as proof that your passing is a matter of importance, not only to heaven, but to the trembling community below. Those who approach the bier make the sign of the cross and hold their breath, some pressing amulets or scraps of cloth to their mouths. You are carried through deserted corridors, the route cleared by anxious guards, the way ahead doused in aromatic smoke. There is little ceremony for the benefit of the masses, no crowded streets, no public display. The court cannot risk further spread, and so what might once have been a day of public mourning becomes a cautious, private affair. The few who attend your burial do so quickly, their words muffled behind sleeves and scarves. The grave is dug deep and lined with lime. The coffin is closed quickly, nailed shut to satisfy both tradition and the anxious demands of those who fear what sickness the corpse might yet carry. The final prayers are recited, not with grandeur, but with the hasty efficiency of men eager to escape the shadow of death. When the last shovelful of earth is thrown, there is no applause, no wailing crowd, just the shivering silence of people eager to move away. But the rituals for the dead do little to change the lives of the living. The epidemic still stalks the halls and streets beyond the castle. The day after your burial, another servant collapses in the kitchen. A courtier is found sweating and delirious in his bed. The city below, which waited for news of your death with bated breath, now has its own tally of the lost. Every bell that tolls for you tolls also for the nameless, the stable boy, the washerwoman, the cook's apprentice, the old guard at the gate. Fears a contagion as much as the disease itself. The palace begins to empty, not by choice, but by necessity. Some flee to the countryside, hoping that distance will provide what medicine cannot. Others barricade themselves in rooms, burning incense and herbs, praying to whichever saints have not already proven themselves powerless. The council meets in ever smaller numbers, each man and woman watching for the first sign of a cough, the first feverish glance. Rumors multiply faster than the disease. Some say your spirit was unsettled, that your rapid burial brought a curse. Others blame foreigners, or heretics, or the usual list of scapegoats. Quacks and charlatans arrive at the gates, hawking miracle cures and protective charms. The sensible ones are turned away. The desperate, of course, buy whatever hope is offered. Meanwhile, daily life continues, out of habit as much as out of hope. Markets open, though fewer wares are sold. Priests hold mass for dwindling congregations. Children play in alleys, watched anxiously from behind shutters. The rhythm of the city slows, but does not stop. The dead are counted and buried, their names added to lists that grow longer each day. The business of succession moves forward. Your heir, already shadowed by the knowledge of how you died, inherits a crown heavier than ever. The new king or queen is blessed, anointed, and given the same impossible promises that this reign will be stronger, safer, longer. The court reshuffles, alliances realign, and the machinery of power stumbles back into motion, pausing only for the next bell, the next fever, the next grave. Your own memory fades quickly, swept away in the tide of new anxieties. There is little time for nostalgia in a world so preoccupied with staying alive. A few loyal voices will whisper your name in prayers. A handful will remember a kindness, a victory, a bitter loss. But for most, your death is only one in a long procession, a reminder that all lives, even those swaddled in power, end the same way, with a hurried burial, a silent chamber, and the relentless march of time and disease. Outside your grave, the wind blows as it always has, carrying with it the mingled scents of incense, earth, and fear. Life, stubborn and unromantic, continues. The epidemic moves on, and with it, the memory of kings. Your death is a fact, but it is also a story. Almost as soon as the last clod of earth falls on your grave, the work of forgetting and myth-making begins. The world you ruled does not pause for grief. The epidemic rolls onward, indifferent to your absence, just as it was indifferent to your power. The people, after a few days of uneasy prayers, return to the ancient business of survival, keeping warm, keeping fed, keeping one step ahead of the next misfortune. Disease, in the end, is the greatest historian, recording its triumphs in empty homes and vanished names. You, Sigismund, become a memory almost against your will. The court whispers about your final days, each telling a little different from the last. Some recall you as wise and resolute. Others remember only your frailty and your final decline. Servants who nursed you through fever boast of their proximity to power, then slip away, replaced by new hands, new faces. The old doctor, outliving you by a month or a year, insists you were doomed by the sins of your enemies, the failings of your own blood, or by fate itself. There is no agreement, only stories, repeated and embroidered with each retelling. The world that remains must find comfort, or at least distraction, in routine. Succession brings its own commotion, oaths sworn, banners raised, and every lord and baron angling for favor in the new order. Your rooms are cleared, your belongings sorted and parceled out. The books you never finished are stacked for your heir. Your clothes are altered or discarded, scented with lavender and regret. The tapestries depicting your victories now hang above a new ruler's hearth. The city's bells toll for the next loss, the next outbreak. Every marketplace has its tale of miraculous recovery or sudden death. Priests preach endurance, merchants count their losses, peasants keep one wary eye on the horizon, waiting for the next rumor of sickness or war. The rhythm of disaster is as familiar as the change of seasons. No one expects relief to last. Your own story slips into legend, smoothed and softened by the passage of days. Chroniclers record your reign, dutifully noting its start and end, its wars and treaties, its famines and feasts. They dwell on the drama of your death, the fate of your body, the anxious succession. Some add details, real or imagined, about your final words, the omens that accompanied your passing, the effect on the kingdom. Others focus on the epidemic, treating your death as a footnote in the wider ledger of suffering. Generations later, your name becomes shorthand for a time of darkness. For scholars and students, you are a date to be remembered, a chapter heading. For the living, you are a shadow in the background of other troubles, invoked in curses or warnings, cited as proof that no one, not even a king, can escape disease. If you linger at all, it is as a ghost, a warning, a story told at bedtime, or in the flicker of firelight when the next fever comes. And always the disease returns. Sometimes it arrives quietly, passing from hand to hand, home to home. Sometimes it erupts in violence, filling the graveyards in weeks. Each time, the world responds with the same tools: prayers, candles, potions, the frantic rearranging of hope. Each time, the survivors promise to remember, to change, to build a future where such suffering is impossible. But memory is short, and need is long, and soon the old patterns return: fear, caution, resignation, and, in the end, forgetfulness. Medicine will change someday. Theories will shift, discoveries will be made, and people will look back on your world with a mixture of pity and arrogance, marveling at how little was understood, how much was endured. But even in that future, death does not disappear. Disease will take new forms, and each generation will tell itself new stories about why the old ones died. Your own reign, stripped of detail, is condensed to a lesson. Power is no shield against the world's indifference. The great die as the small do, and the only immortality on offer is the fragile, flickering afterlife of memory and rumor. You are at last equal to the countless others whose bones lie under the earth, whose names have vanished entirely. Still, as long as the world continues, some fragment of you remains, an entry in a chronicle, a name on a stone, a story told in the quiet hours of epidemic and uncertainty. The details fade, the suffering is forgotten, but the pattern endures. History repeats itself not because people have learned nothing, but because they have learned everything too late. The castle walls stand battered and older. New banners fly, children play in courtyards where once your shadow fell, and the wind, indifferent as ever, carries with it the echo of old fears, the promise of new beginnings, and the quiet, final lesson of your life and death. That even kings, for all their striving, are only passing guests in a world that belongs to plague and time.